I've taken a gamble today and come to the crag to try my project, but unfortunately it hasn't paid off. It's been raining overnight and the project is steeping, so I'll not be able to climb on it, and I'll go home and train on my board. But while I'm here, instead of climbing, I thought I would make another episode in a little series that I've been making about ingredients in my life that I think have really helped me to climb hard. And really they involve zooming back out and seeing a kind of bigger picture of macro factors that have influenced my whole approach that I think have been pivotal, or at minimum useful, in my progression as a climber. So in the previous episode I talked about how being a bit of an outsider at school, not being very popular, not being very confident, allowed me to be used to failure, used to being seen to fail as well, and how that eliminated my fear of failure in my early years as a kid, and that was later a tool that I used to great effect in my climbing. And if you want to see that episode, I'll link to it. But that aspect of being an outsider as a kid had another effect, potentially even more important. Once you become accustomed to and comfortable with being an outsider in lots of different contexts, you're well used to being on your own in any circumstance. That is to say, you're comfortable with being physically alone, not near other people all the time. You're used to doing different activities from other people, but you're also used to having different ideas and approaches than other people. And that is something that I think is really significant in sport. I've spent most of my adult life trying to get better at sport and understand what it takes to get better at sport in order to help other people do that. And one factor in that is understanding basic definitions, basic aims and goals, like what is it you're aiming to be if you want to be a successful athlete in your sport. And so really you have to start from defining what is an athlete or what is a successful athlete. And I've thought about this a lot, and actually I've not seen a lot of discourse about this in the kind of public literature or media. I like to think of this at a kind of meta level, standing back from the strategies and tactics that athletes use, such as working hard, being disciplined, being organised, having lots of effort, all these kind of downstream factors that influence your day-to-day activities as an athlete in training and performance. But when you step back another level and think, well, what determines all those things? What determines the capacity to be disciplined? So when I think of what does it mean to be an athlete, I came up with two definitions that I like and I think about in my own life and in my coaching. My first definition of what is an athlete would be an unreasonable bastard. And I like that definition because people instantly know what I'm talking about. If you can think of examples of really successful athletes or just athletes that have made a lot of progress from their initial baseline, which is really what's important, then often they are like that. They do not take no for an answer. They will always try to find a way around any problem. And the ways they do find around problems are amazing. Like, you're like, how did you think of that? And the answer is, well, I had to think of it. So in a sense, it's a broad mindset of, if there's a problem, there must be a solution. If I haven't found the solution yet, I need to keep looking for it. The other definition that I have for an athlete, which is maybe a little bit more straightforward and I maybe prefer, is someone who is willing to do what others will not. And that can be in any context. That can be the person who's willing to suffer that bit more pain, turn up at the gym that bit more often or that bit more later or under more difficult circumstances. So if sport performance was as simple as adopting that mindset of being willing to do what other people don't, then why is it so difficult to do? And I think the answer is that people are social creatures. We like to conform with each other. We like to be in agreement in ideas. That is how tribes and societies operate. We celebrate and value ideas that are shared between people, practices that are shared between people. And when you come across someone who breaks that tradition or habit or practice, then we are immediately suspicious of that, if not outright hostile to it. And you see this everywhere in life. If you do something different in almost any context, then you set yourself up for running into conflicts and difficulties with other people. And really, I think the successful athlete has to tolerate those conflicts all the time. You can't not have a proper job. How are you going to pay your bills? You can't not have a mortgage. Where are you going to live? Where's your security? You can't not go to university. Education is important, and everyone knows that the education is in a university. You can't not use that training program. All the best athletes are using that training program, therefore it must be the best. You can't go on a ketogenic diet because a ketogenic diet will impair your ability to do high intensity exercise. The number of contexts in which you will run into these difficulties are just endless. So if your mindset is that you find those conflicts and those differences uncomfortable, then being a successful athlete will require a great deal of conscious willpower. You will find doing it habitually from day to day, week to week, decade to decade, very stressful. And that, I think, in a nutshell, is why people who are comfortable, just inherently comfortable with being different from other people, find performance in sport not so stressful, not so difficult, and are able to do it in the long term. Of course, that is not to say that just doing things differently from other people for the sake of it is a good thing to do, not at all. But in order to break personal barriers, you have to do things differently from how the rest of the population, the large part of the bell curve, performs. That means you will have to have more time to train somehow. You can make up how you manage that, it's up to you. You will have to train harder. You will have to be more disciplined. And if you want to break ground in sport, that is to do something that no one else has done, then by definition you are going to have to find something to do differently. If you don't do anything differently, then you won't achieve anything different to what's been done before. And moreover, even if you could, would that really be valuable? Would it be important if you could just follow instructions and say, we know how to produce this result, therefore you take these steps in your training and you will get that result, and that's all there is to it? That just doesn't seem very exciting to me. In my mind, the core reason I actually do sport in the first place is to experiment, is to try new things, is to find the edges and find where there are things to be optimized that other people haven't optimized yet. That involves taking risks. That involves recognizing this might not work, but I'm going to try it anyway. I'm going to try it because it's a plausible idea that I'm willing to take a gamble on. To me, that's the fun part of sport. That's the thing that I have found that I have come to value. I like to test the limits of the ideas, because when you test the limits of the ideas, most of the time you say, yes, that's correct. But once in a while you say, oh, wait a minute, there's maybe more to it than that. There's maybe something that we can change that will just tip the balance in our favour. And that really is where the big gains, both personally and in the context of sport generally, come from. I am not a very courageous person, and whenever I have found myself taking a different position from the mainstream, or the way things are done, and trying to experiment with doing something different, I have my heart in my mouth, and I worry, like anyone else would, that this might be a complete mistake. I do think that being a bit of an outsider as a kid really helped to lower that barrier of entry to taking that position of trying out a different idea, trying out a new thing, and not being so scared of it. It allowed me to take decisions, to try things without really needing a lot of courage. If you're well used to being seen as wrong or stupid or ridiculous, then the possibility of being so again just isn't as scary. But I do think there's also another layer which works in combination with being comfortable with being an outsider, and that is being comfortable with uncertainty. And that's something that I learned much further down the line once I was already a climber, when I started doing new routes. When you do new routes, there's no instructions to follow, there's no description, there's no this is the line, there's no beta. You have to make all the decisions. The route is really your creation, and you can make it what you will, and you have to grade it and name it and do all those things as well. And that, when you haven't done it before, well, I certainly found it quite a daunting experience, and I was a little bit scared of it, and I just thought that new routes were for other people. And when I did my first new one, I really think it actually changed my life. And I did notice, maybe not at first, but eventually I noticed a real mindset shift. Essentially, I felt that doing lots of new routes actually trained me to be comfortable with uncertainty. Now, I don't know if any of this is true. It's just how I subjectively feel that aspects of my life and my background have helped my climbing. So I invite you to take what I'm saying with a bit of a pinch of salt, or a huge pinch of salt. So far in this little series, I've talked about a few different ingredients that I think have really helped me in push my own climbing. My breadth of experience as an all-rounder, absence of fear of failure, being a bit of an outsider as a kid, and being comfortable with uncertainty. And in a future post, I'll talk about another ingredient that I think is like a sort of central pillar that's really helped me, and that's having a really powerful motivation. It feels like a fire sometimes, and I must admit that sometimes it still sort of surprises me, and I'm really glad that I have it. I think it really matters. So in a future post I'll go into why I think I am motivated for climbing, and to what extent that is a trainable skill just like any other, like strength or endurance. So do subscribe to my channel if you want to see those, and I'll see you in the next video.